Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, whatever it is, wherever you are. This is Anne, and I am here with the Holy Night, the fourth Holy Night, which is going to focus on Eastertide. And so I just want to give an introduction. My name is Anne DeSutter. I'm a certified soul level astrologer. I graduated from the College of Visionaries and Wizards um, with Mark Borax and Marcella Eversole in 2017, and I've taken an advanced course almost constantly up until about the last year since then. And Mark practices. Mark developed a system of astrology called soul level astrology. And he found that system through studying with Elias Lonsdale, who is the progenitor of a system called Star Genesis. And what I'm sharing with you today for this fourth Holy Night is about Eastertide. And I'm going to share with you um, from a transcript of Elias speaking about Eastertide um, from earlier this month in December 2023. And then I'm going to share with you a few quotes from the Christian tradition about Easter that have really touched me deeply over the years, because that's the tradition I was raised in. My father was a Trappist monk, and he was at the Abbey of Gethsemane in Bardstown, Kentucky for 6.5 years, and Thomas Merton was his novice master. And so that particular tradition, while I rebelled from it for years, and I don't practice it in the way that most people who consider themselves Christians would say they practice it, is definitely a place that I have deep roots. And so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I want to make a distinction for you all before I begin this transcript between Christianity and Christ and Christedness, because we have this historical, mythological, most likely very real being, avatar named Jesus Christ, an akalotehe, as we would say in my shamanic tradition, somebody who's reached enlightenment. And then we have all of the traditions that have been built up around his teachings for years, for centuries, that is known as Christianity. And there's a difference between what it means to know what Christedness is within us and to connect to that energy within ourselves versus the religious belief system. So the focus of this evening is about Eastertide and the energy that Eastertide brings to us. And I hope that it supports each of you to be able to feel into and know more of what that Christed energy is within you. So without further ado, here we go with the transcript. Elias says, what I want to bring you right now is what I know about Easter. The only time of year that stood out really sharply every year of being with Sarah was Eastertide. And let me give a little context for Sarah. Sarah was Elias's wife, who passed of cancer, and she did tremendous, deep, profound spiritual work during the time they were together. And he remained in communication with her after the time of her death, which is a little out there, a lot out there. Even for me, that's out there. And I just ask you to and a lot of what he's sharing are things that he's downloaded from her and downloaded from the stars as well. And I just want to give that context to what I'm speaking here, whether you believe it or not. Just allow yourself, if you can let the part of your mind, I said this on the first night, relax back, that has a hard time with ideas like that, and just let the words and the transmission land inside of you and see what you find with it. If you can not worry about what you think about all of it so much and see how it lands for you. I'll be very curious to hear what your experience of that is. Okay, so the only time of year that stood out really sharply every year of being with Sarah was Eastertide. I had never been as focused on Easter as I was with her, and she had compelling reasons to treat the entire Passion Week, and especially Easter Sunday morning, with great concentrative focus and dedication. The manifestation of it was dramatic. No matter where we were, no matter what we were doing, When Easter Sunday would roll around, Sarah would make sure at dawn, or just before, or just after, to go down to the river, go down to the water, and give herself over completely to the resurrection, to the rebirth of Christ. And when she would come back from that focus, like for half an hour or an hour down there, usually I wouldn't go with her for one reason or another, she would be glowing all over. She would be drastically renewed. It was something else. And I know that the last Easter that she had in 1993, she experienced the liberation that she was always seeking on Easter. She finally got there through her work that she was doing on herself throughout her cancer journey. What was this all about, really? Well, because I have a complex around religion, like a lot of people do, I was shut off from being able to go very far with this. I mean, really go very far with this because I have this backlog in me from my early life. These are the kind of things that really stick with you, especially if it accords with past lives. There was a really heavy put down of religion in my upbringing to the point of scorn, and nothing neutral about it at all. And it all boiled down to that religion is for the weak, the dependent, and for those of us who are free, religion is long gone, and we're so thrilled to be past it. Well, the religion that we were really talking about in my upbringing was Judaism, and like so many Jews, both my parents found no meaning whatsoever in the Jewish rituals. They just could not relate to it. And so basically, even though I had this upsurge from 12 to 15 years old of religious fervor, I ultimately had very little to do with Judaism, and then I had the strangest relation to Christianity because in a Jewish home, when the rabbis are scorned, they're considered to be one notch above the Catholics and the Protestants, and basically anything to do with Christ, with Jesus, is absurd. Just forget it. No way. So basically, I had no business being so drawn to the Jesus comic and the sequence of comics. I think it was called Classics Illustrated that I was so drawn to. I was obsessed with the image of Jesus. What is this? What's wrong with him? And I had many, many experiences in which it was revealed that I was very drawn to Christ, and it didn't make any sense. Well, to make a long story short, the backlog that gave when grappling with Sarah and her form of caring tremendously about whether Spirit would forgive her of all of her trespasses, I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't even get there. I didn't even understand that was going on. And she wasn't going to tell me. But in reality, she put her whole year on the line at Eastertide. Now, this is someone without a real Christian upbringing. She was basically a pagan with a tremendous involvement in the Baha'i faith. But nonetheless, she put everything into Eastertide, and now I get it. It actually is, now what I'm about to tell you, to say for the religious, the one who has problems with religion in you is you're going to go through the roof. He's giving us a trigger warning here. But Easter actually is the moral backbone of the year. It's the moment when the face that Jesus was not blocked. This is not the Catholic way, of course, that Jesus was not blocked by death. He was not stopped by being strung up on that cross. It was exactly what he needed to give him huge momentum to send him all the way down into the darkest places between the worlds to contest the power of the dark in the darkest places, and then to come back up on Easter Sunday morn saying, I have conquered death for you. I have conquered death for you. Not, I have redeemed your sins in that kind of silly way, but I have conquered death for you, and you can do far greater than what I have done. That's where Sarah got her motivation and her incentive and her zeal to actually follow what Christ had done and do the same. And that is what stands behind the greatest advances in the world, despite the fact that the outer Christian religions are perhaps the most corrupt and the least charitable and compassionate generally in the world. But then what is Easter? What is Easter? Easter. Easter is the moment in the year. And this is Anne talking. Why are we talking about Easter instead of Uranus square Jupiter? Because he's talking about the movement through the year. And for this fourth holy night, for the time of Pisces, Easter is the time of Aries. Easter is the moment in 2024 that he wanted to highlight. So I wanted to just give that context. And for those of you that are into astrology, tomorrow night we're going to start diving into astrology. So don't worry, your astrologies are coming for you. Okay, so what is Easter? Easter is the moment in the year where we search our hearts for how earthbound we've gotten, how caught up in the world we've gotten, and we vow. We do rituals, we don't eat for a while, whatever it takes. We vow that we're not going to keep doing it this way, that we're going to prepare for our own death and rebirth in every moment, and that we're not going to be victims of our own personal failings. And see if you can get this feeling for what it means that Christ is here amongst us, not in a physical body of his own, but filling the ethers of the world with his presence. Now, I am so aware in this moment that half the people listening to this or reading it will not go far for what I'm saying at all. And because of that, my incredible temptation is always to accommodate and appease and pacify where people are at and not shake them up. And if they have a bias against Christ, which is certainly understandable given all factors, I'm not going to shake that up. But then there's something else going on. Very inconvenient, which is what if you discover that people who pass right over Easter every year are only interested in, spring equinox and all that. If you discover that they're missing out and that there's a certain internal shift that's meant to happen at that time of year that people miss, and it really adds up to a disconnect of a major kind. And what if you come to realize that Christ is not sort of the poster boy for religion? Christ is the one who stands in for our greater, vaster, truer self and points us into it. It's not about him. It's not about him. It's about the Christ in us. It's not about worshiping him or damning him or avoiding him. It's about discovering that he is actually the one. What happens if you ever want to get a totally fascinating witnessing of how this works in spirit every year at Eastertide? Read the works of Flower Newhouse. Flower Newhouse. She writes about Easter and all the other times of the year, but brilliantly about Easter. What happens, when all the angels and all of those who died and everybody gets together at Eastertide basically to experience the rising up of the Christ impulse in them so that they will remember and not keep failing, not keep falling for being under the spell of Mammon and all of that. Okay, now because the Elias in me is still to this moment reeling from my religious bias, my negative religious bias, it comes up all the time, is still carrying that. I'm wincing at what I'm saying to you. And I'm not supposed to admit this, right? But I am wincing at what I'm saying to you. I'm wincing about the whole thing. I don't want to be saying it. I don't want to be the one to say it. Why? Because I feel so allergic to moralisms. I feel so uninterested in the perpetuation of traditional religion in any form. And this is Anne, and I can say I'm right there with him. I'm wincing, and I'm watching my numbers. I'm watching a couple people come in and people go out, right? Because they're hearing about they're either bored or they're hearing about Christ, and they're like, ugh, get me out of here. This isn't what I thought it was, right? And I'm like, so what? I'm just going to speak what's here anyway, and we're going to see where it takes us. So I feel so uninterested in the perpetuation of traditional religion in any form. But then I discover that most of the music, the sacred music that I'm most drawn to, is from the history of Christianity. And then I discover that when I listen to that music, my spirit is transported to the places that I remember that I've been in other lives and between lives. And I realize that my whole hang up against religion is simply my own hang up. It's not the truth. In other words, we have given all these things spiritual a strange encasement in a form that repels some and attracts others. And we've made these things feel as though they're only for those who deserve them, who are part of the elect, who are part of the faithful ones. And we have basically blown it in our history of religion. And that's no excuse. Because where are you going to go to find a support system for your spiritual quest? You're not going to find it in the New Age, because in the New Age, what they give you is a little bit of everything and not much of anything, because they lack a deep, true, embodied sense of the sacred. Whew. So to take this one level further, I'm now going to bear witness. I can't believe I'm doing this, but I am, to what I've been through in the last 30 years through what Sarah has brought to me. I'm not going to pretend that it's only been this year and it's only been now and that I've been waking up to my connection with her and what she's bringing to the world and everything. This has been the fullest, freest, truest, but it's been happening for 30 years. It's been happening nonstop. Well, what has it been? Okay. Gonna have to get yourself vulnerable, boy. Get into it. Just as happened with Sarah in my life, even though she wasn't so pure and clear and true in some ultimate sense, nonetheless, what always happened for me with Sarah was that her influence made me mindful of who I really was inside. Well, that's true, but that became tenfold stronger after she died. And during the 2 months after she died, I found myself so much more in touch and in tune with who I ultimately truly am that I was in an ecstatic embrace of that 24/7. And even though I diluted that to some extent after that, it never went away, and it became a decisive influence whenever I needed it the most. The path that has evolved for me can simply be described as discovering at every turn that I'm fully who I am, that it doesn't matter who makes what of it, that it is rooted and sourced so deep in me that I can't possibly deny or suppress it. My path is to make sure that I be who I am at every level. But it's not just that Sarah does that with me. I've witnessed for 25 years now, that's a long time, her doing it tremendously with other people. And my wife, Sharuna, when she came all the way into it, and it changed her drastically, mainly in one way, it made her appreciate and acknowledge and honor who she is inside. And it did that so effectively over a long haul of slow, gradual steps that she stunned herself really by how much more loving, kind, and compassionate she could be with herself and everybody else. But it's not just me, and it's not just Sharuna. So here I go into controversial territory again. You can always count on me going where angels fear to tread. I don't think angels fear to tread it. They just know not to go there. But that doesn't mean I know not to go there. So we're with 4 people who are our so-called children who are now growing beyond childhood. Raphael is 22 and Ale is 20 and Kalki's 18 and Savitri is 15. And they live with us all the time and they tolerate us pretty well. And how do they absorb all of this influence of Sarah and Haven Song? On the surface, not that much. They're not even religious or spiritual or anything particularly on the surface. But people who know them, and there are some, would agree that they are a profoundly sacred crew. And particularly the quality of believing in themselves. Given their karma and their other sides, they have an amazing ability to go with, believe in, affirm, acknowledge, and honor themselves. And I attribute that a lot to what they gained from Sarah. And now I'll just describe one other ingredient in our world that has taken up quite a bit in these 30 years. And then he goes in the transcript to talking about a couple of books he wrote called The Christ Letters and the Book of Theana, which you can find both of those books by Elias Lonsdale on Amazon if you're interested. And I'm not going to take a long time to go into all of that this evening. But those books are available if this is speaking to you and you want to explore it further. And he says, so I'd like to invite you on the adventure of joining us as we somehow manage to hold true to something that everybody has always said is too much. And again, it is too much, and it's the real thing. And in our times, let's get over this too much thing. If it's real, it's real. It's not too much. It's just barely enough. And the too muchness that and that's the end of this transcript from the Fourth Holy Night from Elias. And this too much that he's referring to is allowing ourselves to go all the way down in that place. You know, he made that reference to what Christ did, is that Christ went all the way down into that darkness in order to overcome death. And he's referring to that too muchness of what is it for each of us to believe in ourselves so fully. We could also equate it to Gandalf, for those that are Lord of the Rings fan or Fellowship of the Ring fans, right? Going all the way down and then coming back again. And because that is the same kind of energy that we have with the Christ. And so what I want to do here is I just want to share with you a couple of quotes about Jesus that touched me really deeply. And this first one is from Thomas Merton, who was my father's novice master, and it's from a book called Seasons of Celebration. And this is about the power of Eastertide, which is the time when we have the ability to wash ourselves clean. We can do that any day of the year. And there's a specific quality to Easter time and Eastertide to being able to enter into that realm that Elias is pointing us to here and saying, like, this portal is here. Come, take it, walk through this portal. And here's what Thomas Merton has to say about it. And then I have one more quote and we'll be complete for this Fourth Holy Night. But now the power of Easter has burst upon us with the resurrection of Christ. Now we find in ourselves a strength which is not our own and which is freely given to us whenever we need it, raising us above the law, giving us a new law which is hidden in Christ, the law of his merciful love for us. Now we no longer strive to be good because we have to, because it is a duty, but because our joy is to please him who has given all his love to us. Now our life is full of meaning. And I wanted to share that with you because there was a period of my life that I had this, I was in an organization and was on a spiritual path, and I had a spiritual master, and her name is the lady. And the lady liked to say that who she was to teach people how to pray. And one of the prayers that she spoke to us that she had, which I then adopted for many years, was, "My Lord, let me only be in ways that will please you." And that way of praying and that way of being gave me something profound and helped me to begin to let go of all of the harsh and rebellious parts of me that were always just wanting to poke and push and pull at everything that was coming at me, to imagine, like, what would it be like if I have a desire to be in a way that will only be pleasing? Then, of course, I had to go through a whole other period of time of letting go of pleasing anybody and listen to what's true for myself. And now I'm in this phase of working on bringing the two together, of how do I fully be myself and honor myself and really listen to what is needed at any given moment and not care about what other people think about me, and be real And how do I do that and simultaneously care profoundly, deeply about the impact that I have on others and how I impact them? And that is territory that I'm continuing to work and learn about, every day and every moment of my life. So I want to share one other quote with you that's from the Christian tradition. And this quote is from Father Richard Rohr. And it's adapted from a text called Following the Mystics Through the Narrow Gate that came out as a CD or DVD many years ago. And this quote is called Experiencing the Holy. We have put our emphasis on trying to love God, which is probably a good way to start, although we do not have a clue how to do that. What I consistently find in the mystics is an overwhelming experience of how God has loved them. God is the initiator, God is the doer, God is the one who seduces us. And all we can do is respond in kind, and exactly as Meister Eckhart said, the love by which we love God is the very same with which God has first loved us. Quote, the mystics' overwhelming experience is this full body blow of the divine loving them, the divine radically accepting them, and the rest of their life is trying to verbalize that and invariably finding ways to give that love back through forms of service, compassion, and nonstop worship. But none of this is to earn God's love. It's always and only to return God's love. Love is repaid by love alone. End quote. And I wanted to share that quote with you because it brings to light this theme that's been building from the first Holy Night and is being really brought through more thoroughly in this fourth Holy Night, of that in the end, astrology notwithstanding, religious beliefs notwithstanding, and I want to say to you, like, if you have a thing about Jesus, or you have a thing about God, or you have words that you use or beliefs you have, use what you have inside of you to work with this. Don't get hung up on that word God, or that word Christ, or that word Lord, or whatever. Like, the Almighty Supreme, the all that is, the force of creation, the force of life that helps all things to be animate, that gives us the ability to actually be living, breathing creatures. However you consider or think of that, use that to be with here so that you don't get stuck and sidetracked with your mind about the whole belief system, because in the end, none of our belief systems matter. And in the end, and this is what I have to say about this, and I wrote this down many years ago, all belief systems are a trap. When we get too stuck in the belief system, the only purpose of the system is to give us a container to be able to do the work inside, and that's what matters. And so this theme here that Elias has been weaving for these last few nights has to do with us knowing our worthiness, knowing that we are love, knowing that that is all that we are here for, and that is all that we desire, and that instead of comparing ourselves to these higher ups, whether it's angels or priests or teachers or even Elias or even me speaking this thing, like, it doesn't matter what it is, that we find this recognition and this realization inside of us that at any moment we can turn within, we can wash ourselves clean, we can release the things that we need to release, we can find forgiveness that we need to find, and we can become a more compassionate, loving, better version of ourselves that can carry more beauty, more love, more compassion, and more light into this world that is desperately starving for that. So thank you very much for joining me and for this fourth Holy Night. And I want to let you know that tomorrow night, for the fifth Holy Night, we will be going into astrology land. We will be looking at Jupiter conjunct Uranus at 22 degrees Taurus. So For those of you that have been wondering when does the astrology come, you're about to have your wish. And thank you so much. And I wish you a beautiful, blessed evening filled with a tremendous amount of love. Good night.